Good morning to all and welcome. I would like to welcome all the officials from the Ministry of Finance, Investment Division, the Ministry of Energy and Energy Industries, and of course, the Trinidad Petroleum Holdings Limited. My name is Wade Mark. I'm the chairman of the Public Accounts Enterprises Committee. Our committee, which is the Public Accounts Enterprises Committee, has a mandate to consider and report to the House of Representatives on the following. 1. The audited accounts, balance sheets, and other financial statements of all enterprises that are owned or controlled by or on behalf of the state. 2. To look at the Auditor General's report on any such accounts, balance sheets, and other financial statements. And finally, whether policy is carried out efficiently, effectively, and economically, and whether expenditure conforms to the authority which governs it. Now, the purpose of our meeting is to conduct an examination of the audited financial statements of the Trinidad Petroleum Holdings Limited for the financial year ended September 30th, 2019. The committee is desirous of hearing the challenges being faced by the key stakeholders at TPHL in an attempt to determine some of the possible solutions to these challenges. Now, it is important to note that the role of this committee is to help, may I emphasize, help TPHL improve its delivery of services in an efficient, effective, and economic manner. May I also advise the officials who are here that the meeting is being held in public and is being broadcast live on the Parliament's Channel 11 and Radio 105.5 FM and the Parliament's YouTube channel, ParlView. Viewers and listeners can send their comments related to today's topic via email parl101@ttparliament.org, facebook.com/ttparliament, and X @ttparliament. I will now invite my colleagues who are here to introduce themselves, starting with my colleagues on my immediate right to introduce themselves, and then to be followed by my colleagues on my immediate left.
Chairman, I will always defer to the Vice Chair and my senior Mrs. Hazel Thompson-Ahi.
Good morning, Rushton Parry, Vice Chair of this committee.
Good morning. I'm Hazel Thompson-Ahi, member of this committee.
Good morning, Keith Scotland, member of this committee.
Mr. McClatchy.
Stephen McClatchy, member.
Good morning, Renuka Sagram Singh Suklal, member.
Good morning, Laura Lizamali Singh. Welcome, member.
Yeah, thank you very much. And may I now invite representatives, officials to introduce themselves, beginning with officials out of the Ministry of Finance, Investments Division.
Good morning, Chairman, committee members. I'm Sharon Mohammed, Director, Agro-Based Manufacturing Services Sector, the Investment Division, Ministry of Finance.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Malini Gangapasad, Acting Senior Business Analyst, Investments Division, Ministry of Finance.
Yes, I'll now invite officials out of the Ministry of Energy and Energy Industries to introduce themselves.
Good morning, Chair and members of the committee. I am Penelope Bradshaw-Niles, Permanent Secretary at the Ministry of Energy and Energy Industries.
Good morning, Chair and members. My name is Mark Rudder. I'm the Deputy Permanent Secretary acting at the Ministry of Energy and Energy Industries.
Are there any other officials from the ministry?
Good morning, Chair and members of the committee. I am Ayasha Nikki, Director of Downstream Petroleum Management Division, Ministry of Energy.
Good morning, Chair, members of the committee. I'm Terence Ali, Acting Senior Chemical Engineer in the Office of the Permanent Secretary at the Ministry of Energy.
I'll now invite officials from the Trinidad Petroleum Holdings Limited.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm Michael Kwame. I'm Chairman of Trinidad Petroleum Holdings Limited and Heritage.
Good morning, Chair and members of the committee. My name is Renola Joda Singh, Deputy Chairman of the TPHL and Heritage.
Yes.
Good morning, Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Newman George. I'm Director at TPHL and Chairman of ParlView and Guaracaro.
Thank you.
Good morning, Chairman and committee members. I'm Joanne Sinanan Singh. I'm the Corporate Secretary for TPHL.
Good morning, Chairman and members. My name is Eric Keskila, Chief Executive Officer, Heritage.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Kathleen Allen. I am Chief Financial Officer, Acting Heritage.
Good morning, Chairman and committee. My name is Mustaq Mohammed. I'm the General Manager at ParlView Fuel Trading Company.
Good morning, Chairman and committee members. My name is Darren Lal, and I'm the Finance and Corporate Lead for ParlView.
Good morning, Chair and members of the committee. I am Lilavati Rambaran, Head Finance Petrotrin.
Good morning, Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Quentin Thomas, Senior Manager at Petrotrin.
Good morning, Chairman, members of the committee. I am Anissa Datadine, Accountant, Guaracaro Refining Company Limited.
Good morning, Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Klein Laborde. I'm a Contract Administrator with the Guaracaro Refining Company Limited.
Anyone else? Okay, thank you very much. At this time, I'd like to invite a representative of the Ministry of Finance Investments Division to make a brief opening statement.
Good morning again, Chairman and members of the committee. The Investments Division, thank you for the invitation to attend this morning's committee meeting with Trinidad Petroleum Holdings Limited. The Investments Division of the Ministry of Finance is responsible for executing the investment policy as prescribed by Cabinet The mandate of the division includes oversight, monitoring, and where necessary, the rationalization of government's equity holding in commercial enterprises. The division acts on behalf of the Minister of Finance, Corporation Sole, and carries out the corporate function. This includes representation of the Minister at shareholders' meeting, establishment of new enterprises, and rationalization of the investment portfolio of the shareholder. We look forward to this morning's discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. May I invite the Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of Energy and Energy Industries to make a brief opening statement?
Thank you very much, Chair. I want to also say again good morning to the members of the committee and also to the listening and viewing audience. The Ministry of Energy and Energy Industries recognizes Trinidad Petroleum Holdings Limited as a major stakeholder in the energy sector of Trinidad and Tobago, which is vested with the responsibility of developing and managing Trinidad and Tobago's key oil and related assets. Three of the key subsidiaries of the TPHL, the Heritage Petroleum Company Limited, ParlView Trading Limited, and Guaracara Refinery Limited. All three companies play a critical role in the energy sector, with Heritage overseeing exploration and production, with revenue generated through crude sales and crude storage, ParlView, which oversees terminaling, fuel trading, product supply and logistics, and Guaracara, which oversees the preservation of the refinery assets and providing utility services to ParlView. As a regulatory body, the MEI regulates Heritage through the issuance and monitoring of exploration and production license, and also monitors the volumes of crude oil exported each month. Additionally, the ministry regulates ParlView through the monitoring of the computation of the ex-terminal prices and volumes of refined products imported, sold locally, and exported to the region. Heritage and ParlView continues to cooperate with the ministry in meeting obligations under the various licenses and in working on strategic initiatives geared at increasing operational efficiency in both the upstream and the downstream energy sector. As the Ministry of Energy team here, we are welcome and we are prepared to take your questions. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. And I'll now invite the chairman of the Trinidad Petroleum Holdings Limited to make a brief opening statement. Mr. Kwamina.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. On the 2nd of September 2018, the government of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago announced the cessation of the refinery operations of Petroleum Company of Trinidad and Tobago Limited. Subsequently, on the 30th of November 2018, Petrotrin ceased its refinery operations and a newly owned state enterprise, TPHL, was established and charged with the responsibility of overseeing and holding the shareholding in 4 wholly owned subsidiaries, namely Petrotrin, Heritage, ParlView, and Guaracara. The oversight capacity of TPHL is fortified by having TPHL directors sit on the boards of the subsidiary companies and its subcommittees, including finance and investment, audit and risk, operations and safety, procurement, and tenders, so as to better monitor performance, governance, compliance, and to intervene as and when necessary. While TPHL generally oversees major management decisions of the subsidiaries, it does not actively participate in the day-to-day running of the various operations. The PS has already taken us through what Heritage in fact does, as does ParlView and Guaracara. So I will also just mention that Petrotrin is a non-operational entity and retains the non-core assets and treats with legacy Petrotrin liabilities. The core assets of Petrotrin were vested to the subsidiaries through the Miscellaneous Provisions Vesting Act of 2018. The goal of the board has been to transform an entity that was making substantial annual losses and accumulated billions of dollars in debt into substantially a profitable business with free positive cash flow. Respectfully, I dare to say that this has been accomplished by, as at today's date, a revenue of about $36 billion, payment of taxes of approximately $12 billion, and a net profit of about $5.2 billion. A review of the, but I would like to say that admittedly a review of the structure and organization of the TPHL group may be required. This is expected to commence later this year, having given the change in status of ParlView from an asset held for sale to a going concern in financial year 2021. The status of Petrotrin's legacy issues and the possibility of an imminent sale, lease, or operatorship of the refinery asset, which I should mention is currently subjected to preservation methods which are based on international best practice, the Shell design engineering practice for the preservation of idle hydrocarbon assets. So the future role of TPHL will need to be considered in light of these recent developments. The group has, however, done exceptionally well since commencing the operations and exceeded all financial and operational targets. Both Heritage and ParlView, for the year that concerns the committee today, reported profitable results of $1.4 billion and $109.3 million respectively, while contributing combined $1.2 billion of taxes, royalties, levies, and license payments to the government of Trinidad and Tobago. The group's recorded revenue from continuing operations of $6.3 billion and a net loss after tax of $2.3 billion for the financial year ended September 30th, 2019. The loss is attributed largely to the performance of Petrotrin before the cessation of operations on November 30th, 2018, as well as significant one-time charges related to the subsequent restructuring exercise. For the financial year ended September 30th, 2019, Petrotrin recorded a standalone net loss after tax amounting to $8.9 billion and contributed $3.6 billion of consolidated net losses to the group results. As one would expect, the transition and restructuring of Petrotrin posed significant challenges for the auditing of financial statements. The establishment of the group and the split of assets was exceptionally complex, and it took a considerable amount of time to address these matters. Further, for obvious reasons, the primary focus was placed on the initial reorganization of the debt and its subsequent transfer from TPHL to Heritage, which was critical. This was a layered and intricate matter, which included dealing with foreign regulators and was successfully executed in May of 2022. In parallel to the reorganization of the debt, the split of assets, and the transfers from Petrotrin to Heritage, ParlView, and Guaracara had to be accompanied by physical asset verification exercises, counts, supporting valuations, and given the nature of the assets and the time lost due to COVID, there were significant delays in completing the review. Following the verification exercises, agreements had to be refreshed and financials updated. Included in those updates were the reconciliation and resolution of the intercompany balances. This could not be completed without the completion of the reorganization of the debt, along with the asset transfer reconciliations being done and updated. Finally, and more specifically to Petrotrin, there were difficulties in completing the Petrotrin financial year 2019 audit, as supporting documentation to verify the financial statements were difficult, if not impossible, to locate, and if located, were in many instances incomplete. Management was also at the time concerned with responding to legal matters and claims, negotiating settlements, and resolving other asset and intercompany matters. Significant progress has since been made on providing updated information for the completion of Petrotrin's outstanding audits. Finally, financial audits were prioritized with the reviews of the operational entities, Heritage and ParlView. These were conducted first given the requirements of the credit agreement dated the 5th of May 2022. The external auditors were also limited in respect of resources to concomitantly complete the reviews of all entities, as well as an independent third-party consultant had to be engaged to complete what is referred to as dismantlement calculations, which is both a lengthy and complex exercise. The financial audits for financial year 2020 and 2021 for both Petrotrin and GRC are ongoing and should be completed by September 30th, 2024, and the financial year 2022 audits by 31st March 2025. The management of all the subsidiaries continue to work assiduously on completing and bringing current the statutory audits for Petrotrin and GRC. Heritage and Paria are fully compliant and have submitted their financial statements in a timely manner along with management letters. Paria's financial statements for financial year 2023 were completed and forwarded to the Ministry of Finance in March 2024, and Heritage is expected to submit to the Ministry of Finance its financial statements for financial year 2023 in April of 2024. While there continue to exist challenges in respect to the submissions of the consolidated financial statements subsequent to 2019, we have been in constant communication with the Ministry of Finance and have been providing regular updates on the outstanding audits. Unfortunately, Mr. Chairman, that is my opening statement, albeit not brief. I hope this is the last time I contradict what you have to say.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman of TPHL. You said in your opening statement that both, is it Heritage and Paria up to date with your audited financial statements, and they have submitted same to the Minister of Finance or the Ministry of Finance?
Yes, please.
Okay. So what we have before us is 2019. So we have 20, 21, 22, and 23 formally submitted to the Ministry of Finance. The Ministry of Energy and Energy Industries would have gotten that as well. Those.
The Ministry of Finance will receive the financial year 2023 for Heritage in April of 2024, which is this one. So I'm sorry. And so I would say by the end of this month, they will have up to 2023 in Heritage and up to 2024 for Paria.
Right.
But Mr. Chairman, I don't want you to, insofar as TPHL is concerned, there are consolidated financials, and those consolidated financials would need to incorporate Guaracara and Petroleum, and those are the two entities that we are having some difficulty with. So you may not have what the consolidated financials before you, but you would have the individual financials for those, the operating entities in the company, in the group.
Can you inform this committee the last year that TPHL submitted its consolidated financial statements to the Minister of Finance or the Ministry
That is the year that is currently before you now, 2019.
2019.
Yes, please.
And what is the anticipation for the rest of the period 2021? You did indicate that two companies are experiencing some challenges.
So we would say that September of 2024, we will be up to 2021 with respect to both Petroleum and Guaracara, which would then permit us to do the consolidated for up to 2021, 2022 by early 2025 to take us to 2022 for the consolidated financials.
Okay. Yeah. I just want to ask my colleague to intervene at this time.
Through you, Chair, I've seen when we submitted the questions for written responses, if I ask my colleagues to look at page 2, paragraph 4 of the written response, I think that came from TPHL's corporate secretary. We asked, provide a list of TPHL's executive management team, their resumes, areas of responsibility, remuneration package, include the date that each person joined the organization and date they assume their current position. The response, Chair, the curious response is that TPHL is a pure holding company. There's no legal requirement for a dedicated executive management team. TPHL has a board of directors which, at its discretion, may appoint officers to manage the affairs of the company, and there's a corporate secretary. Given that TPHL exists primarily for ownership of the subsidiaries, it does not participate in any other business. Bearing in mind the synergies between TPHL, which is the holding company, Heritage, Paria, GRC, and Petroleum, and bearing in mind the statement, if I ask my colleagues to look at page 1, the last paragraph, number 1, major governance policies are issued by TPHL for adoption by all subsidiaries. However, day-to-day management and entity-specific and operational policies are developed and approved by the individual subsidiary boards. TPHL performs an oversight function in respect of all subsidiaries, providing appropriate decision-making regarding group, individual company strategy, targets, performance, and cash flow distributions. Through the subsidiary, TPHL's board is advised of major risk and reviews and mitigatory controls. Can I ask how you reconcile that position with the bold statement made at paragraph 4? The corporate secretary is here, Chairman. Can I ask the corporate secretary to reconcile that position with us, please, or for us?
Committee member, it's on, right? What we referred to in respect of the paragraph 4 is as it relates to the Companies Act and the requirements of the constitution and formation of a company that speaks to the requirements solely for a board and a corporate secretary. So given that TPHL is a holding company, there's a discretion as to whether or not the board would like to appoint an executive team in order to run to run and manage the subsidiary companies. They didn't do that. We had at one point a general manager who has since left, and that general manager had oversight of all the subsidiaries and would report into the board. But following the resignation, the board has been the main body into which the subsidiaries have been reporting into, and the board has had oversight from the general managers as to what is happening in the individual companies, and where there is strategic decisions and overarching policy decisions, the TPHL board has been taking those decisions going forward.
If I can add, Mr. Scotland, this is an issue that I have been wrestling with. So the fact is that the individual entities manage themselves and report into the TPHL board. They are fully staffed. They have strategic plans. We monitor their strategic plans to make sure that they're following them, etc. And each board meeting, they report up into the TPHL board. But members of the TPHL board also sit on the individual boards. So there's a tremendous amount of synergy between the companies. In fact, you would find that Petroleum, which is a non-operating entity, quite frequently will be able to liaise with Heritage if there's an audit issue, or if, for example, they want assistance or guidance in relation to a financial matter. There's a tremendous amount of interaction between the company. And you would see the development of the relationship in the following manner. When Mr. Jeffers was part of the TPHL team as an employee, TPHL was going through the refinancing. So it was necessary for TPHL, in order to manage the refinancing, to have tentacles into each organization in order to understand the financial status of each organization and the requirements of each organization. And Mr. Jeffers served that purpose very well. In addition to which, at the start and early on, all of the organizations were grappling with the financial responsibilities, and Mr. Jeffers was an extremely experienced financial expert. I would put him as high as that. So his interaction was brought into being by TPHL because that was felt as a necessary introduction for the group. Subsequent to his leaving, we brought on a Mr. Darbro, who was equally experienced, a former McKinsey employee. And what we found that he had a one-year contract because we are still sort of grappling with this structure. And we gave him a one-year contract because we wanted to better understand what may be the requirements of the group. And what we found actually was that even though he's a very intelligent and hard-working gentleman, he was underutilized at that point in time because all of the groups had really begun to build their own ability and their ability to stand on their own. So there was less need for that type of interaction. So as it stands now, we are at the stage where, A, we have the corporate secretary who interacts with and gets the information from the groups. We have the interlocking directorships. And as it stands now, we do have to take a look at the question as to what is the final structure of the group, because PARIA is now, I would remind the committee that there was at one point in time a thought that PARIA might go with the refinery. That is no longer a thought. It's not happening. So PARIA is now staying as part of the group. You have heritage. And so once we finally grapple on what the group will look like, then one can contemplate the question as to whether you might want a group HR manager, a group finance manager, etc. But as it stands now, the group is functioning respectfully as far as I can say, and I think my board would agree with me. The group is functioning. The synergies are very strong between all the members of the group, and that is brought together at the TPHL board meeting, where each of the CEOs sit in on the meeting and report into the board.
And so, if I can just cull your answer, it's a work in progress, but I think that, Chairman, through you, that consideration ought to be given because the response bothers us a little, and maybe consideration ought to be given, particularly in light of the interlocking directorship, to having a specific, bearing in mind each company stands on its own as a legal entity, maybe having PHL have its own team, so to speak, but that is something we wouldn't want to go into your day-to-day operations. Chairman, may I ask, and I've received your submissions, voluminous as it was, but I was only able to find the org structure for Trinidad Petroleum Holdings Limited in, well, the heritage document, this document here. Can you all provide, Chairman, through you individually, the org structure for PARIA, for heritage? Can that be provided to us as a matter of urgency? Because I think, Chairman, if we tell tales out of our in-camera session, we will be calling back each entity separately because we don't think that 2 hours will be able to do justice to what each entity may have to say. Can you provide us with, in a timely way, the org structure for each entity? Can I ask the chairman of both Heritage and PARIA to undertake to do that for us, please?
Much obliged. You realize that if you call back each entity separately, that would mean I'll have to come back.
Could you speak a little louder, sir? I'm not hearing you.
Just commenting that bringing each entity back separately would mean that I would have to come back on 3 separate occasions, which I welcome.
Heavy is the head.
Yes, much obliged.
Heavy is the head. No. Can I ask the chairman of PARIA if he would be willing and able to provide that documentation for us, please?
Yes, Member Scotland, through you, Chairman. Yes.
Chairman, I think we will need that in order to understand. And when you do so, let us know who are the members from the parent company who interlope with respect to the individual companies so we can understand, Chairman, the synergy and the linkages. All right? Chairman, I've defer to you again.
Before you, both Mr. Newman George the organizational structure that my colleague referred to, and heritage. I think it's heritage as well.
And Paria, yes.
And Paria. Did we get from heritage? Who is the chairman of your good self?
Pamela.
Right. So you'll get this shortly. Okay.
Chairman, what we got, Heritage readily provided us with the overriding structure or structure at page 49 of the document. But when I looked through their other submission, Chairman, after Mrs. Lazamali Singh and I looked at page 2003, we didn't find the org structure. So we would like that, please.
Those will be supplied.
Yes.
And apart from heritage
and
Paria, we are talking about, is it 4 subsidiaries, Mr.
Yeah, 2 of them.
4 is Heritage, Paria, Guaracara, and Petroleum.
Okay.
But he was saying 2 are not really operational.
No.
So I wouldn't want to bring us back with people who are not.
So when you say they are not operational, could you clarify for us?
Yes, please.
Do you have employees who are responsible for overseeing activities, even though we know what is taking place?
Sure. Yes.
Do you have a team of people?
Yes, please. But so you can certainly see the structure of those organizations. Those organizations do have a structure. But when I say non-operational, I mean they're not necessarily providing a service external to them. They're not engaging in their core business, and they're not really generating revenue. Yes, but they certainly have, for example, Petroleum, because it's looking after payment of outstanding debts, etc., has a very substantial, well, I would say about a 15-member financial department. Okay. Going through records, etc.
Okay. Yes, Mr. Perry.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I just want to bring to the fore a bit of my difficulty in how the arrangement is. I understand the necessity for having a functionality of persons sitting at TPHL inside of these subsidiary organizations. I know we don't have a huge pool in Trinidad and Tobago, perhaps, of all the necessary expertise, so we may have, for functionality purposes, expert purposes, having people inside there. But TPHL as a legal entity, which I assume has a board of directors, and every director under the Companies Act 1995 have certain fiduciary and legal responsibility. Now my query is, where does the liability lie in terms of you having this TPHL who should be overseeing the safe and profitable operations of these 4 subsidiaries, 2 of which actually is in operation? Where do you draw the line in terms of accountability versus responsibility by having that commingling of the same persons in TPHL sitting inside of those operations of the subsidiary?
Wonderful question, Mr. Deputy Chairman. The fact about it is that's one of the benefits of a holding company. So this holding company essentially really just holds the shares in those other individual companies. So on the face of it, somebody who sits on the holding company will not be responsible for an issue that takes place in Heritage. But if they sit on the Heritage board, then they will be responsible as a member of the Heritage board for an issue that takes place in Heritage, similarly Guaracara, etc. So your responsibilities lie with your individual seat on that particular board.
And just 1 second. So I understand the individualization here,
Yes.
but TPHL is a legal entity.
It doesn't, with respect, and I mean, maybe we could look at it a little bit, but it doesn't the entity. Mm-hmm. And as a matter of fact, if you read on holding companies, they say that that's one of the benefits of it, that it's a separate so that you can't really get at the holding company if something happens.
So there's no vicarious liability
No.
at the holding company?
At the holding company level, especially a holding company that is holding just the shares.
Okay.
So, for example, one of the things that could happen, and probably one has to be, if, for example, TPHL were to issue a directive to one of the subsidiary companies, and that was to result in a liability, then you might be able to jump across. But on the face of it, no.
Okay.
Yes.
But Chair,
Go ahead.
Chair, can I? And I guess, Chairman, this is further bolstered by the Act on the 30th of November 2018 with that miscellaneous provision vesting Act, whereby clearly defined in the law, of course, the assets, of course, vested into each of these entities. So by law, they would now have exclusive responsibility, whether it's Paria, whether it's Heritage, whether it's Guayakara, predicated on the existing legislation where assets were vested. That gives these companies, of course, the exclusive responsibility to manage, to control assets. And as a consequence of that, TPHL existing through the company's law and by virtue of how you would have been registered as a holding entity is now not responsible for the administration. While you're responsible for the oversight and overseeing of these entities, you're not legally, coming out of the question that Ms. Member Parry would have asked, you're not going to be held vicariously responsible for the actions of these individual entities. They haven't been vested assets under their care by this 30th of November 2018 piece of legislation?
That's why I was careful to say in my opening statement, Mr. Chairman, about the question of revisiting the structure as a whole.
Yeah.
Because I can see and I can understand the confusion, because if it is a holding company set up to hold the shares. But if for example, and one may recoil at this, but maybe it might be that TPHL maybe need to step back a little bit of its interaction. Because as I say, if TPHL, for example, tells its subsidiaries, you all should have a conflict of interest policy, then it might be stepping outside a bit of its bounds of just a shareholding, a company that's there to hold its shareholding. So you do have to look at the interaction a little bit more to see whether it is in its reach into the subsidiaries, it may be creating a bit more of a responsibility than it ought to.
Chairman, that is why, through you, I started with the initial submission made by TPHL, which states major governance policies are issued by TPHL for the adoption. This is at page 1 of your document, for the adoption by all subsidiaries. So that's policy. Bearing in mind the liabilities under Section 99, subsection 1 of the Companies Act, and the fact that they are interlocking directorship, maybe the time has come to review that situation, because it may not be as insulated as we think it is, you know.
I accept that. And that's why I was very careful in the opening statement to mention the need for that to be revisited.
And revisited as a matter of urgency, because I will tell you, now that the companies are up and running and finding their own ethos, it may be necessary. You know, sometimes the child has to leave the parent, or the parent may have to put out the child.
So you remember in the opening I spoke about the role of TPHL, because
Yes.
it may very well be that the shareholders may see it fit now for Heritage to stand on its own, Paria to stand on its own.
And TPHL still be there.
Well, it could, yes. Oh, so, yes.
Chairman, thank you very much.
Go on.
No, Chair, that was generally because I think just at least for the benefit of the viewing and listening public and the non-legal minds, in the public, of course, is just really to understand the synergy of and more so the role of TPHL, and that is just something that I want to explore briefly. Even though yes, it forms part of the general discussion, but this now is just really for the benefit of the listening and viewing public. So if we just rewind one more time quickly, just summarize. reorganized. So we are looking at, we have the creation of TPHL. It's a holding company. It has been incorporated, registered, of course, with its responsibilities, its roles pursuant, as the corporate secretary would have elucidated, pursuant, of course, the Companies Act with its rules and responsibilities. We then we had the creation of these subsidiary companies. Subsidiary companies, Heritage Petroleum Company, Paria Fuel Company, the Guayacaro Refining Company, and then we have Petroleum Company of Trinidad and Tobago, the four subsidiary companies, registered and are existing as entities, subsidiaries to the parent, the holding company. 30th of November 2018, we have, of course, the miscellaneous provision, Heritage Petroleum, Paria Fuel Trading and Guayacaro Refining Vesting Act. That act now vests into each of these subsidiary assets, which they are now exclusively responsible for, with assets which, of course, these companies are responsible for managing, and, of course, they have that administrative responsibility over. That's just chronology, just very simply put, just so that the viewing and listening public can understand very simply the structure that is before us. As a holding company now, and you could correct me if I'm wrong, as a holding company, you're currently, the structure that currently exists is where we have members of the board of TPHL also sit in these, or have responsibilities, or sit as directors as well on each of these subsidiary companies. That is what creates the nexus between the holding company and the subsidiary company, because I guess that is the reporting mechanism. So, for example, respectfully, Chair, I see you have TPHL Heritage. You're a director of Heritage. So you sit as a chairman of TPHL. You're a director of Heritage. So it means that, I don't mean this in any negative way, but your tentacles are in Heritage. You sit as the chairman of TPHL. For example, Mr. George is the chairman of Paria, right? But you don't sit on TPHL. You sit on, excellent, right. So Mr. George now sits on TPHL as a member of TPHL board, but he also sits as a chairman of Paria. That is the connectivity, that is the, currently.
Just add that at the TPHL board meeting, the respective CEOs attend that board meeting to report in. One of the things I always feel very sort of badly about is that there are TPHL board members that don't sit on, for example, Heritage, which is a major player. Right. So, for example, we've quite often had joint meetings where they can get a better handle of what's happening in Heritage, and then as well, too, as the CEO of Heritage sits to report.
And the CEO sitting is critical, especially as it relates to good corporate governance, ensuring it's not just directors who are there, of course, the CEOs, because they are now responsible for the day-to-day management and coordination of their individual entities. And based on your opening statement, you're currently reviewing that structure that exists, whether or not, and of course, as Member Scotland would have alluded to, these companies, of course, I can see in its embryonic stages where these four subsidiaries were created. It was probably necessary for the parent to be there holding the child's hand, but as these companies, the rubber has hit the road, these companies have developed, the process, TPHL as a holding company is now in the process of reviewing the relationships that exist between itself and the subsidiary.
Mr. Chairman, one other issue that might be of interest is that I think as well this form was developed alongside advice taken from consultants, etc., that were looking at the refinancing. And one of the interesting things is that the debt that was held by TPHL is now moved to Heritage, because Heritage is in fact the revenue earner.
Right.
So in fact, one of the major focus points of TPHL has been in fact removed, because that debt has been transferred to Heritage so that there could be a more direct play insofar as that is concerned. So that, I mean, again, brings into question the continued value of the TPHL.
And I'm happy, sorry.
Chairman, the holding company will always have some value if there are subsidiaries. But let me ask the Ministry of Energy. The Ministry of Energy is here with us today, yes? Ministry of Energy, understanding that dynamic, is the ministry satisfied as to how that dynamic is working itself out?
Well, so far it has worked very well. The ministry interacts with all of the subsidiaries, even the non-operational ones at times, depending on what the matter may be, and but specifically more with the Heritage and ParlView on a day-to-day basis. But so far we have no issues in terms of how the structure is with respect to the directorships and the management.
What oversight do you undertake and provide as it relates to the holding companies and the subsidiaries?
So at a ministerial level,
yes,
of course the minister will meet with the board of directors, both in terms of the strategic vision and the direction. We too, in terms of development of our strategic plan, one of the things that we do is all of the enterprises under the Ministry of Energy, we consult with them so that there would be an alignment in terms of what the ministry strategic plan is, and also with respect to each of the enterprises. And so at the strategic level, this is what is done. So there are meetings at several different junctures at different levels, some operational, some technical, some regulatory, right? And also the strategic areas. And so therefore, in terms of the management, we don't have an issue in terms of, relationship between the Ministry of Energy and the TPHL and its subsidiaries.
Chairman, again, and I want to direct this to the chairman of TPHL.
Sorry, if I can just add one more thing.
Go right.
Yes, we also have a government representative on the boards, right? So we have persons who from the Ministry of Energy on the board of TPHL and the subsidiaries.
So you have a direct input or a direct
as well, yes.
person who is there.
Yes.
That brings me, Chairman, through to the next question. Chairman, if you look at page 11 of our booklet and the submission, under the heading Strategic Plan, Chairman Kwamina, I want to direct this to you and your corporate secretary. And we asked the question, does TPHL have a strategic plan? And if yes, what period does it cover? Bearing in mind, I know this may have been submitted before, but bearing in mind the dynamics that you have just described here for us, I see your response. You have the document before you. Maybe do you not think it may be time upon sober reflection to revisit that response?
Well, I'll tell you, I'm always open for suggestions, and they're crossing my mind in this discussion is that, we do have access to very experienced consultants on all of these issues. As a matter of fact, one of the points I was going to make is that, our bankers are international bankers who have seen this formation and have not raised an issue, but I am going to go to those consultants and get their opinion. One of the novel points, because I saw this point with the strategic plan, and I myself grapple with a strategic plan for a holding company, but you would also have noticed later on in the submission, we spoke about the fact that Ernst & Young is very expensively doing a strategic plan for Heritage.
Heritage, yes.
And I am going to ask them, having regard to the expense, whether they will look at giving us advice as to whether one ought to be had for
just the
TPHL
advice
as well. Yes,
and you can let them do some economies of scale.
Of course.
Some economies of scale.
So that is certainly an option that we would consider.
Thank you.
Chair, if I might, and if I may add to that, so Member Scotland would have started with page 11, but you would also have to agree with me, Chairman, notwithstanding the fact that your response on page 11 was that TPHL does not have per se a strat plan. On page 13 of the same submissions, Heritage last strategic plan for 2021 covers 2021 to 2030. So there is an existence. So even though TPHL may not have one, Heritage is compliant. And even if we go further to page 17 of your same submissions, Paria Fuel completed a strat plan conversation, strat plan that covers the period 2019 to 2022, and it also says has also commenced the process of developing its plan for 2023 to 2026.
Yes.
And why I'm putting that on the record is that suggests, notwithstanding TPHL having a strat plan that covers all of these subsidiaries are not running rudderless. There are strat plans in place for Heritage. There is a strat plan in place for Paria, and those are being developed.
Sure. I just want to correct two words that you use. I don't know that I think that TPHL is not compliant. I think that TPHL, because of what it does, in my view, and I think in view of the board and in view of up to this point in time, did not require a strap.
Of course, let me withdraw that. That is not how I should have.
Because that was your response. Your response is, look, viewing all things being considered, we do not think it's necessary, and that is why my query was, in light of now the emerging synergies, do you not think it's time to revisit that? Chairman, on that issue, when you provide us with both Heritage and Paria, the org structure, would you focus a little on the HR element? Because there are some issues in HR, we will not raise it now, that really bothered us. We don't want to both Paria and Heritage. So would you focus on the HR aspect, because there are some issues that we'd want to interrogate in that regard. Chairman?
Yeah, Chairman Kwamana, you identified that the debt from the entity called Petrotrin is now transferred over to the books of Heritage. Okay.
So in the restructuring exercise, you would remember there was a significant borrowing that took place. That went under the TPHL head, and that has now been moved from TPHL to Heritage for many strategic.
Okay. So that debt is now
with Heritage.
Yes. Could you give this committee an idea of, or remind us, what was the value of that debt? What has been removed by Heritage so far? Because I've seen over the last year or two, Heritage has been in a very favorable profitability position.
Yes.
And what is the current status of that debt in terms of what is still outstanding?
Yes.
Coming out of the rationale for closing down the old entity called Petrotrin because of this debt?
Yes.
Sure.
Good day, Mr. Chairman and committee. So, do you want me to start from 2018 or focus on? So, in 2018, the debt that would have sat on the group's books was worth $11.9 billion, and 7.2 sit on TPHL, 4.6 sat at Petrotrin. In 2019, June to be precise, we would have had to refinance because some of that debt was made up of a 2019 bullet bond and a 2022 amortizing bond. Once we did the refinancing, I'll just walk through some of what would have changed. So the debt was done in two parts. We would have gone back out to the bondholders and made an offer, and 52% of them accepted the offer on the 2019 bond, and 66.82% accepted the offer on the 2022 bond. Out of this, we would have developed a new senior secured loan for 7 years, an international bond of TT 3.8 billion. So that would have been one of the first things we did. Next, we would have had to raise a senior secured loan in 2 tranches. And the goal of this loan was to help pay off the remaining bondholders who didn't accept the offer. So we would have made some payments to that effect. We would have also paid off a shareholder loan that would have sat on the books of Petrotrin, partially paid off. Heritage and Paria also contributed their own funds to help pay off that loan. We had some accrued interest, and we would have paid for the fees. So at the end of, let me fast forward a bit, to at the end of August 2019, what we would have had on TPHL's books was a debt of $1.2 million US, or 8.34, and that was made up of the the bond that I spoke about and the senior secured loan in tranches. We also had a TT 419 balance on the 2022 bond. Petrotrin debt balance was also impacted. We were able to get the debt at Petrotrin, and I'll walk through that a little bit more. We had a $2.7 billion government guarantee for Petrotrin that is still outstanding at the end of 2024. We paid off $643 million owed to Bladex. We paid off and refinanced $119 million for Republic Bank. It was repaid in 2020, and we repaid in 2019, which is when I spoke about the loan that we took that was paid partially to Petrotrin debt and money from Heritage and Paria. That shareholder loan was paid off, and that was 1.2 billion TT. And that would have been where we would have been at the end of 2019. The refinancing that moved the debt from TPHL to Heritage books took place in 2022, and at 2022 August, you see, so we would have done almost the similar thing where we would have offered to the bondholders and everything, but at the end of 2022, where there is now no debt on TPHL books, we would have had a debt of on Heritage's books of $6 billion, which was made up of a 2029 bullet bond with a 3.3 and a term loan of 2.8. On Petrotrin books, we would have had 2.7 billion TT dollars. That's at the end of 2020.
Just in terms of a percentage-wise, right, the fact that Heritage has been paying off some of that debt, what would you say in terms of the overall debt that was moved, that Heritage has been able, or the subsidiaries have been able to successfully reduce that debt as of perhaps today, if you could give a figure like that, in terms of a percentage reduction?
I don't have a percentage reduction here. What I do have is how much Heritage paid off in total, which would be a combination of principal and interest payments of $7.5 billion.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
May I just follow up from what Mr. Paria said to the same officer in question? We know that from the data that Petrotrin had a loan that was due sometime in 2022 of 750 million US. Am I right?
Yes, that was an amortizing bond.
Right. Now,
yes, Mr. Chair.
From the time that loan was taken out, payment of both principal and interest were being met. Am I right?
Yes.
As opposed to the 850 US million, which was a bullet payment, as you said.
Yes.
And became due in August of 20, is it 19 or 18?
19.
19. As we speak, what is the current status of that 750 million US dollars? Has TPHL, through Petroleum Legacy, been able to pay off that entire debt of $750 million, which by the end of 2018, when Petroleum was closed down, the balance on that 750 million US, which was coming to an end in 2022, would have been how much? Do you have any idea?
Yes, sir. So that original loan, which was 5 billion TT, when in 2019, ahead of the refinancing, what was left on that was 1.4 or 1.5 billion dollars that was outstanding.
Right.
And as part of the refinancing, we would have made an offer to the bondholders. And as I mentioned earlier, 66.82% of them accepted the bond. So we would have then paid off with the senior secured loan that we had. We would have then settled off for the balance that did not accept. But that 2022 bond was then transferred into a new senior secured. So the balance on that, in terms of the holders who did not accept, but they were paid off. And for the holders that accepted, a new senior secured loan for an international bond of TT 3.8 billion was created.
And when is that supposed to end?
That loan is supposed to end in 2026.
2026. Just wanted to ask another question here. Mr. Kwamina, I know that we had some challenges when there was this transfer. And I'm talking about the assets, according to your statement, the assets of Petroleum were transferred to Heritage, Paria, GRC, following the cessation of Petroleum operations on November 30th, 2018. Now, some of the challenges experienced, according to your submission, by the group in the restructuring of the company in 2018 included, one, the unavailability of data relative to wells, plants, and infrastructure to support a complete transfer of information from the legacy company to the new company. Two, managing public perception and rebuilding corporate reputation. Significant instances of pilferage, theft, vandalism, and sabotage. That is what was stated in the submission on pages 1 to 6. Now, the first question I'd like to ask, could Mr. Kwamina indicate how much of the requisite data turned out to be unavailable?
I would not be able to indicate how much of the requisite data turned out to be unavailable. what I can say in relation to this, the transition, is I think that unfortunately one of the unexpected consequences of the transition was that the personnel were essentially told that Petroleum is going to be closed. And effectively, I mean, and one can understand human nature, people left. And so there was not the type of transfer of information that one would have liked from Petroleum into Heritage. And then basically you had people at Heritage picking up information in relation to all of the things, including financial data. We've had significant difficulty as well grappling with the absence of financial data, but it is a significant problem that we face.
Yeah. Could you put it in writing for us? And secondly, how has this data unavailability impacted on the operations of the new company as well? That is something that, again, you can give me a little tight summary.
Absolutely.
And then you can also put that in writing.
Absolutely.
So if you can tell us that.
Well, I will ask Mr. Pescula to answer that question as the CEO of Heritage.
Right.
So the primary impact of the data unavailability has slowed our progress in our production growth overall, in terms of what we understood for our reserves as well as the resources and being able to compile that. So it really did slow down our ability to start up quickly and drive that production growth that was part of our strategic plan.
And the whole issue of how was TPHL able to rebuild corporation reputation, or its corporate reputation? And how were you able to measure that? Because that was a major challenge. Have you been able to address that in terms of your corporate reputation, given what has happened with the absence of crucial data? Mr. Chairman?
Yes. Well, I think that the public perception and the corporate reputation not necessarily linked to the question of the missing data, except maybe, to be frank, probably in one respect, and that is that reconciliation exercise at Petroleum with suppliers has been, I mean, a task, because you would have suppliers having a certain information and you would have Petroleum having certain information, and we are only operating on the basis of a reconciliation. So that the public, I can see there being an impact on the reputation insofar as that is concerned. But I think that when you see the public perception and rebuilding, it is a question, I mean, obviously, and I have to say, and admittedly to the committee, I myself had not appreciated not being from, I mean, the impact of Petroleum closing down is a tremendous impact. So the point about it is that in terms of building back the corporate responsibility, we have done things. We have gone into sport, we've gone into culture. We help the fence line community as much as we can. We employ the fence line community as much as we can, and so I think that has worked well for us, rebuilding the corporate reputation of the entity. Well, not rebuilding, building the corporate reputation of Heritage.
And can you advise this committee whether you have done a costing as it relates to providing the company and, by extension, the shareholders with some kind of rough estimation of the value of losses attributed to pilferage, theft, vandalism, and sabotage?
Sure. That is an excellent question, if I may say so, Mr. Chairman. That particular comment was really centered on the period that you're looking at. So when I first became the chairman of these entities, theft and vandalism was a serious problem for us. I have to say that it all had to do with the copper industry, etc. That was a huge problem for us. That fact that has been dealt with, along with the fact that we have increased the modernization of our security, etc., has really, in fact, removed this as being a current concern for us. But it was a huge concern in terms of generators going missing. It was a huge concern in or around the 2019-2020 area. But it is no longer a major issue for us. It is an issue, but not a major issue. But we can certainly give you the stats from the 2019 period as to what we were impacted with at that stage. But certainly the addressing that industry, it seems, I mean, it might be a coincidence, but it seems to have nipped that in the bud for us.
I think Mr. Scotland?
I will give
way
to Mrs. Thompson, and then after Chairman,
yes.
Through you. Thank you.
Yeah. Hazel.
You are too kind. Mr. Chairman, through you to Mr. Kwamina. Trinidad Petroleum Holdings Limited is a holding company. The whole concept of a holding company is that you exercise control over your subsidiaries. And I believe that as a good father, you no longer have the concept of bastard children in society. You are concerned about all of them. In the SWOT analysis from Heritage Petroleum, they list a number of weaknesses: age infrastructure, minimum measurement facilities, lack of baseline manpower constraints, and all of these things. And having regard to your role as the holding company, and also you would be benefiting because it's not just exercising control, but whatever profits and so on as a parent company, you'll be benefiting. So are you concerned about assisting your children? I see you smiling like that. With some of the constraints they have, because you want everybody to grow. So are there plans to do anything to help with those constraints that they have, that they're laboring under?
It's extremely expensive. So aged assets, I mean, when you're talking about dealing with your aged assets, it's an extremely expensive undertaking. But we have committed, and I'm now speaking as the chairman of Heritage, we have committed significant funds to dealing with the assets and dealing with the aged assets. We've also incorporated engineering authority into the organization, which looks at the assets very carefully before they're utilized and make sure that they're up to par. So we are dealing with it as best as we can. But one of the things that in this board we always say is that we only talk US dollars. And we don't talk US dollars at a minimal amount either. So you're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars to repair the assets to the level that we would want. So I would hand over to give you a little bit more detailed response to the CEO, who can tell you a little bit more about but we do have a significant focus, and that is, I would think, our top issue. I would say top 3 issues at Heritage. One of them would be certainly, probably at the top, how we deal with the question of the aged assets.
Just whatever, the others, your subsidiary might need. What about, so they can answer at the same time, what about liabilities as well? Are you interested in assisting along those lines?
With monetary liabilities?
Exactly.
Well, really, anybody, the subsidiary is the one that really has all of the money. That is Heritage. But the point about it is that absolutely, Heritage, really and truly, Heritage is the core. It's a core entity. And Heritage does do quite a lot to help the other subsidiaries. And ParlView has been quite a surprise for us as well in terms of what it's been able to generate in terms of funding. So both of them tend to help the subsidiaries. And the interesting point I would say is that help tends to be in terms of building or maintaining the corporate reputation. So helping them with their fence-line communities, with employment, with charities, etc. Insofar as the only entities that tend to be struggling would be the non-operating ones. And I think what I should have said first off, and I apologize for this, up until recently, the international loans that we had, and I think even continuing now, I should say, the lenders were very, very careful to say Heritage cannot use its funds for the other entities, because they were concerned that, remember, they're lending the money and they're expecting a return. So Heritage had, at one point in time, if we wanted to sponsor a football team, we had to ask New York. Now that has been removed to some extent for charitable purposes, but in terms of intercompany lending and so forth, we're not permitted to do that by way of the debt or documents. But I can't emphasize enough, Madam Member, that the synergies, and I'm speaking quite frankly, the synergies between the companies are extremely strong, and I have seen it on many an occasion where one company is falling down, the other company has come across to help. So, and I think that one of the examples would be that out of Mr. Chairman's question, when we had the problem with the theft, and we had issues with things down in that, there were instances where I was told that Petroleum required assistance, and Heritage Security said, well, that's not our jurisdiction. But that has now been eradicated, and you would see Heritage Security going across all of the areas to make sure that we're properly secured.
Thank you.
Much obliged.
Mr. Chairman, just following up on what Hazel had said, what is the conditional or the preservation cost for the Guaracara assets annually, and does Heritage pick up that cost in terms of that preservation cost? And if you can give an idea of what annually may be the cost for that.
Very happily refer that question to the chairman of Guaracara, who's responsible for that, Mr. George.
Member, through you, Chairman, the monthly cost is about $540,000 monthly.
That's US or
TT. I speak in TT.
Okay,
not
sorry.
Yeah. Yes.
You speak in different tongues, sir?
No, I speak in one tongue, sir.
Okay, so at 500, that's about $6 million TT dollars a year for the preservation of the asset. Does Heritage pick up that cost?
No, Guaracara picks that cost up.
From what revenue?
Well, we have a series of lease arrangements with ParlView and Heritage. We have tank storage, etc., that we generate that income from.
And that is sufficient to manage that preservation cost?
Just the preservation cost, yes.
Now, given the fact that it's $6 million approximately a year, does that drive the incentive to find in terms, and I know I want to straddle very carefully here because I don't want to go down a road that we're not ought to be going, in terms of the bidders or the prospective purchasers of the refinery. Does that factor in terms of the fact that we're going in about 5-6 years trying to find a bidder? and looking at this cost to preserve, does that factor into the incentive to find a suitable bidder with, some way we can get something productive or beneficial to the country while removing that $6 million cost annually on the preservation of the asset?
You want me to take that? Well, yes, absolutely. That is well. There is no greater driving force insofar as the refinery is concerned than trying to get somebody to take it over. I don't even think that, the driving force is even more significant than that would want us to get somebody to take it over. And there are additional costs. We have the Bank of Nova Scotia, which out of Houston, there are consultants that go through each bid and assist in terms of the assessment of these bids, etc. I would think that we went through a very formal process some time ago. That did not yield any benefit. I would think that this is probably the most progress that we've made. We do have some prospects at hand, and I cannot express to you how incentivized we are to get.
Any ability to share how many bidders that may be before your consideration? Any idea of, can you share the amount of bidders that may be before consideration right now?
Through you, Chairman. Through you, Chairman. Currently, we have had 8 expressions of interest for the purchase lease or restart of the refinery.
All published this bid round in terms of the invitations, or do you get unsolicited proposals from time to time?
We get unsolicited proposals from time to time.
So it's 8 in all before us right now?
8 in all before us.
Any idea of the time frame or timeline before a decision may be made in terms of moving forward, or we're too early for that yet?
Our process is that we expect non-binding offers by May 10th, and from then we will review those non-binding offers, and understand the way forward.
Any of those bidders? Sorry, let me just rephrase that. In terms of those bidders, how many, or can you share how many may be local or combination of foreign and local? You have an idea?
I would say at this time, all of them have a composition of local and foreign participation.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Chairman, thank you. Through you. Chairman, having read the submissions by TPHL, it says that it values performance and it is value-driven, a company that is focused on achieving world-class financial performance. Chairman, that is at page 43 of your submissions. What international benchmarks have TPHL utilized in attempting to achieve this world-class financial performance? Can I ask your Vice Chair, the Vice Chair of TPHL, maybe to respond to that, Chairman?
Yes.
If you look at page 43, under the rubric Trinidad Petroleum Holdings Limited, we do read your submissions in its entirety.
So the international benchmark would be from the benchmark that Heritage would have done, especially the exploration and production performance. And it was the benchmark was really around what is the lifting cost per barrel of oil, and what are the sort of cost profile and the cost performance of companies of similar scale and scope. I'm not sure if Heritage can elaborate a bit more, CEO?
Certainly. So we hold ourselves to the international standards like ISO 9000, ISO 14001. So those are very specific in terms of how we operate, and those are international standards that are followed throughout the oil and gas industry. So there are a lot of tools that come with that, like plan, do, assess, to adjust when we evaluate our operations. In addition to that, we work through ISO 14001 in terms of our environmental management. I know you've seen a copy of our ESG report. We are very standardized in terms of how we are calculating and reporting on our environmental performance. And then the primary benchmark that we use would be through IHS, which is a very well-known software, benchmarking software. We use that to benchmark our financial performance as well as some of our drilling performance that's out there. And then we've done not so much international, because understanding the assets here in Trinidad and Tobago are very unique. We have done local benchmarks, which includes international companies, but it's in terms of benchmarking our local lifting costs and how those perform. And we've performed quite well. If you look from a US dollar perspective, average lifting cost is somewhere between 13 and 23 for the companies that we looked at, and Heritage is at the low end of that.
Does, Chairman, through you, does the holding company set key performance indicators, standards or prerequisites for the other entities?
The answer to that question is no. I
didn't get the answer.
Sorry, the answer to that question is no. The individual entities would come to us with their key performance indicators, and we would look at that and consider whether we think that those key performance indicators are sufficient or not.
So there will be, if I understand it, maybe then an interplay?
100%.
May I ask you this? Because, Chairman, if we were looking at 2019, what would you say was the effect of COVID-19 on the progress of the group? And can I ask it for each individual group, please?
I was about to.
I know, Mr.
So
Kwame.
Heritage CEO
yes.
would respond first, and then I would ask the General Manager for ParlView to respond.
Yes, please.
Much obliged.
Yeah, so the effects of COVID on our operation were several-fold. The first is that, of course, that challenged our day-to-day operations, just in terms of how we would manage the interactions of people, as we all learned through society. So that really slowed down our ability to respond very quickly to production challenges that we might have in the field, as we learned to cope with that. While we optimized that through the time of COVID, it also delayed, because of the price of oil and the impact on the industry overall, it delayed our ability and we made choices to slow down our hiring, which challenged our resourcing of projects, as well as slow down the sale of our crude and our development programs overall. So it had a several-fold impact on our operations, and ultimately that meant that we were not performing against the strategic plan that was set in 19 and then reset in 2021 because of those delays from COVID-19.
ParlView?
On the ParlView end, we had similar issues. I think the major challenge for us was handling international ships coming in to be berthed at ParlView, so we had to restructure our procedures for how we board and we offloaded those ships. It also affected our asset integrity program because of the ability to have contractors on board working efficiently during a time where we had to maintain social distancing during that COVID period. So our ability and the number of contractors we could have brought on board to execute the asset integrity program was hampered. Those are the two big areas.
Do you find that you have hit your stride? Are you back into stride post-COVID, or is there still a sluggishness?
I don't think we've quite gotten back to our stride, but we've certainly made a lot more progress since COVID in terms of actively pursuing our asset integrity program.
Chairman, may I ask the Ministry of Energy, are you providing any oversight? I'm glad that you have a representative on the board of TPHL. Chairman, that is encouraging, to say the least. But have you done any assessment of the performance of these entities independent of themselves, so we're not just singing from the same hymn book or drinking our own Kool-Aid? Have you done that?
Yes, we do. We have on a technical level, so with respect to what you would have asked before in terms of the financial performance, so typically just what the CEO of Heritage said in terms of lifting costs, in terms of how the operations are managed, in terms of wells drilled and so on. That's something that we look at internally on an annual and also on maybe a quarterly basis, right? We continue to look at that. Also because of the interplay with, for example, like the subsidy and so on in terms of ParlView, we do have oversight in terms of what is happening in terms of the operations, because there's a linkage in terms of what happens at ParlView and in terms of the purchases and the operations. And so therefore the ministry will also, our director of Downstream Petroleum, that's part of our duties there as well. And then with respect to the asset integrity, because of our regulatory function with respect to health and safety and the environment, that's another level at which we have oversight and interact with the companies in terms of providing management and also advice when necessary.
Chairman, through you, may I just ask, hopefully my penultimate question in this session. You're talking to the public now. I'm asking a pointed question. There's been a lot said about this incarnation of the companies, a lot said. I'm asking this for each chairman. Do you see your entity being sustainable in the future of Trinidad and Tobago and the economic landscape in Trinidad and Tobago?
All right, I think you will get a very unique perspective from the CEO, who is of international repute in this industry and has just been here for about just under a year, so he would give you a very good perspective.
So my question is, I'm asking this for the public because there's a lot of history here, and I'm asking, it's a question that I would require an objective and an honest answer. Do you see there being a sustainability, and you speak for Heritage, correct? As this entity as it exists now and it operates now?
So very plainly, yes.
Why do you say yes?
Yeah, so I think that, and I've mentioned this even in some of the interviews that I've done, that people look for oil and gas where we know there's oil and gas. And so Trinidad and Tobago has a long storied history. And while it does have its challenges, especially around asset integrity, and a lot of wells that have already been drilled, there still is tremendous opportunity. And you see that because we have international companies coming here to continue to try and produce. So that's probably the first point. I think the second point on that is that there's a macroeconomic environment right now that's quite positive, just in terms of overall global demand and supply. And Trinidad plays an important role in supplying a good crude to the international market. We get a good benchmark price for that. And so as a result, I see demand for Trinidad crude remaining. And so with both the price coming out of COVID and the demand increasing, as well as it being a place where we know there's oil and gas and we can find more, just from a perspective of the encouragement that I've seen in the 9 months that I've been here, Heritage has drilled its biggest offshore well over the summer. We've just popped another well that looks to be very, very strong. So these are all signs that there are still great opportunities to be drilled and that there's opportunity to sell that crude to an overall global market.
Can I ask Paria to answer, Chairman? Sorry.
We see Paria as a sustainable business. I think we have a few things that makes the business very unique. One is our storage position and the volumes that we have available. 2 is where we are located. And 3 is the markets that we continue to service. We service the local market, and we have grown the regional market, by close to 5%. There's also a lot of opportunity for us in offshore bunkering, which we are exploring and continuing to grow the market for Paria in the offshore bunkering section. So we see Paria as a sustainable business, not now, but way into the future.
What about Guaracario Refining Company Limited?
Guaracario Refining is just in preservation mode. So there's no future for that. We are hoping, but pretty soon, that there would be either a purchaser or an operator for Guaracario.
And how close are we to that goal?
Well, as stated by Mr. Mohammed, we expect to have non-binding by the 10th of May. By the 10th of May, we are hoping to have some proposals, non-binding proposals, after which time we will be, negotiating and so.
And Petrotrin?
Well, I think that, again, Petrotrin is a non-operating entity, and I would have loved to have brought that non-operating entity to an end some time ago. But if I can say holistically, though, the CEO gave a response for heritage. It's very technical from an oil-based point of view. But I think that the stealer march on Paria and to some extent Guaracara, the fact about it is that Trinidad has tremendous potential from a storage point of view, the marine access, the tankage, etc. And I think that we have been looking at it, but we need to put a bit more focus on it, and it's probably a little bigger than just TPHL, but the ability for us to have a storage, we are geographically extremely well placed. We have the facilities in place, we have the key in place, etc., to take full advantage of that, and so that is an area that is of great interest to me.
When you say geographically we are well placed, geographically in relation to where, to who, to what?
But I mean, obviously, I'm speaking about Guyana and Suriname. I mean, interestingly enough, I think that we are. It's easier for us to be a transshipment point for Guyanese oil than probably even Guyana itself. Wow. But I mean, there's obviously political considerations and so forth there. But the fact is, we have certainly been putting that facility on the table, and we're hoping to get a bite in relation to that.
I think, Chairman, thank you.
Okay, Laura Lizama, please.
Thank you very kindly, Chairman. Permit me to start, Chairman Komena. I want to thank you for your very comprehensive opening statement, because it addressed a number of the concerns that I myself had, and I think it clarified in the public domain a number of concerns, and it put for us a better understanding of the functionality of the holdings company. One of the things identified in this submission that you gave to us, just around page 7, speaks to TPHL really focusing on shaping philosophy, governance policies, approving strategies, etc. But then just below, it talks about a shift in the organizational culture. And I'm very, very keen to ask, or to get a response rather, and in the absence of the organizational structure chart and a few other things, I just want to ask you about this shift in the organizational culture, and I suspect it will be primarily in heritage and Paria. Can I ask you, please, under these things that you have listed here, aligning culture, staff and stakeholder participation, employee accountability, and training and behaviors, communicating change, and again through model behavior, can I ask for you to expand on this for me and for the general public, please?
Ask Mr. Keskula to respond to that as well.
Yeah, so Heritage, being a company that's 5 years old, is still relatively new in its life cycle. And so there was a concerted effort to really make sure that we get everybody aligned and moving in the same direction. So the first thing is that we set up some values. They're called our Inspire values. You can read through those on our website. But it's really how we want Heritage to work together. And then we did a very specific exercise as we were working to build the organization around one team, one journey. This is our heritage. And it really serves as a mantra for the organization to say, we really want to work together all towards the same goal because this is our heritage as the national oil company for Trinidad and Tobago. And that was very important to get that alignment, given that we started as a new organization in 19 and had to rebuild that organization to deliver on our targets. So that's really specific to the culture, the things that we took on.
Can I ask you, please, has there been resistance from or any form of pushback, or has it been rather smooth and effective?
So a culture's a journey. It takes a long time to change. We have as we built the organization, we hired from a variety of places. We have folks that have come from international oil companies, as well as some of the legacy employees. And so merging those different cultures, which were very different, does take time. But I think, one of the things that I've noticed about Heritage in my time here is that sense of pride from the organization and how important Heritage is to the government of Trinidad and Tobago. It really is that rallying cry. So not so much pushback, I'd say from my observations, but it does take time to really build a new company culture.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that response very kindly. Chairman, can I ask you, please, what are your levels of satisfaction in the direction that your subsidiaries, your two major subsidiaries, are going?
If I could start again, ParlView has really been a surprise for us in terms of how it is done in the business and how it has managed its mandate, and it has turned into a profit-making venture, which is good. Heritage is a very successful company, but the energy industry is by its nature quite a profitable business. Heritage has the challenges with its asset integrity. It has its challenges that it operates in a mature basin. But I think that it rises to meet those challenges. But of course, it is the subject of significant demands by its shareholder. And so you will have demands in terms of production, etc., production expectations, which sometimes are not met because of the asset integrity issues or the mature basin issues. And so they probably, in my part, Madam PS, needs probably be a little bit more understanding of the challenges that we meet in terms of the production, because we keep getting hit over the head with the fact that the production is not where it should be. But I want to say that it is a priority for us to have the production at the levels that it is. But overall, I am satisfied with the progress of all of the entities, save for I do wish that the Petroleum legacy aspect of it, we could have closed that door some time ago. But that it just keeps going on, and I do wish that I can put that to rest. But other than that, I'm satisfied.
Thank you kindly. And I just want to encourage you. We, I think, are very satisfied to have received, or at least to know, or comforted to know that your audited statements for the two companies, at least, are up to date. It's something that's almost a rarity, Chairman, that we see from enterprises coming before us. So I want to encourage you to keep with that thrust. And I just want to shift our question to the PS at the Ministry of Energy and Energy Industries, please. Madam PS, I know you've given us comprehensive responses insofar as oversight, but just on your written submission here, just on the back page, you spoke about reports, critical reports and operational data and updates on the operations of the companies, and direct conduct routine site visits and inspections of the company's facilities to ensure compliance. Can I just ask, with relevant legislation, guidelines, etc., can I ask you please to just expatiate a little bit on that or expand a little bit on that for us, please? Thank you.
Yeah, sure. So based on the regulations, from a number of different levels, from approvals for overall development plans, approvals for new acreage, and then even in terms of the daily reports, in terms of drilling reports and so on. So those are things, data, production data that we would get from the companies. And so different reports, we have different frequencies, yes, based on the Petroleum Act and the regulations. And we have different departments which are assigned, and we have the Energy Data Hub, which is the online system where all operating companies are required to submit data. And then with respect to the operations, we have from the same Petroleum Operation Management Division, they are responsible for health, safety, and the environment, and therefore, in terms of the equipment, the assets, we have routine inspections. So I'll ask the DPS here, who former mandate as the Director of Petroleum Operations, will be able to answer that more extensively.
Yes, members. So we, the ministry, have a Petroleum Operations Management Division, which I was the director, former director, as of last year, which will approve, for instance, rigs for operation, inspect platforms. We'll also inspect all the facilities that are existing in Heritage and PARI as well.
All right. My concern has to do with risk, plant upgrade, maintenance, and the overarching need to look at health and safety. And notwithstanding a number of things I've seen in the report that seem to suggest that the organization is looking after all the material elements, I have not quite picked up on the human element. And my question would be, what has been the performance of the health and safety in the two subsidiaries over the last, say, 2 years that would give an indication that we are really mindful of our human resource in the field?
I'll ask our CEO of Heritage and then the GM of PARI to respond.
Yes, thank you for the question. So we have seen a general improvement year over year of our overall recordable injury rate. From an industry perspective and a personal perspective, any injury is too many. So our total recordable rate for 2023, as an example, was about 0.92. So that's number of injuries per 200,000 hours. And we work about 4 million man hours. And so our focus first, though, is we want to manage, make sure that if we do have an incident, that the outcome isn't a serious injury. And we perform much better there, where our lost time injury rate is about 0.18 from 2023. So again, it's too many injuries. We don't want any. But we have seen year over year improvement in terms of our injuries. In terms of spills, from an environmental performance perspective, we are continuing to upgrade our infrastructure. We have a significant number of spills, but what we've seen is that the magnitude or the severity of those have been decreasing. So while we are making progress there, we still have a long ways to go. And as the chairman of Heritage has mentioned, we have a very active asset integrity program and put a lot of our capital spend and operational spend into asset integrity.
have a few questions I would like to raise. If Mr. McCarthy is over. Mr. Kwamina, internal audit reports. And that is why I think my colleague indicated we have to have separate meetings with the three entities. We are dealing with 2019. And I've seen a pattern developed. I'm not saying under you. But when we don't have reports on time, persons employed in companies owned by the state and who have committed wrong, including fraud, given the statute of limitation. When we don't have reports before us on a timely basis, these things can go unsanctioned. So we have a 2019 report, but we're in 2024. 4 years would have lapsed. Almost. And the reason why I'm raising this question is this. Mr. Kwamina, how long have you been chairman of this company, TPHL, as chairman?
I think towards the end of 2019, if I recollect.
Now, the 2019 report, we have had, see that thick document there? Yes, that is what we got. We're still going through it. But there are several internal audit reports. The bulk from Heritage, minority from ParlView. The first question I'd like to ask, from your knowledge, are there any outstanding internal audit reports that we have not received as a committee? As far as you are aware, we have in this document between 8 and 12. So in all, 12 internal audit reports. 8 for Heritage, as I recall, and between 2 and 4 for ParlView. Can you tell this committee if those are all the internal audit reports that have come to your attention as chairman that have been made available to this committee?
I will have to check, but I suspect that the answer to that question is for the relevant period, yes, but I will double check it and make sure.
There was a person, the group head of finance, Mr. Kwamina, he would have been located within TPHL when that person was employed in 2019, because that is the accounts, those are the accounts that we are dealing with. 2019 report.
Yes.
Right. Is he one, Mr. Jeffers?
Yes.
Okay. Can you provide this committee the following? You would have information indicating how many people applied for that job, how many people were interviewed, and at the end of the day, who got that job. You would have that available?
In relation to Mr. Jeffers?
In relation to the posts. You remember the post is group head of finance.
No,
that is what I'm doing.
I don't think that's the post.
Well, what is the post that Mr. Jeffers occupied when he was there?
One moment, please. TPHL Finance / Portfolio Management and Investor Relations Leader.
Oh, so that was his portfolio?
Yes. Yes.
Right.
So
he still works there, Mr. Kwame?
No. He's
when did he leave?
He left in 2022 to go on to answer Macau.
Right.
But he would have been in the transition. So in the prior board, he would have been the person that would have led the entire bond, all the transactional issues with the banks abroad.
Okay.
Yes.
Right. Now, you as the chairman, you may not be aware of everything.
Absolutely.
Good. Are you aware, or was it brought to your attention, that in 2019 or thereabouts, there was a phishing attack on one of your companies or subsidiaries that resulted in a fraudulent transaction in which a false company was established outside of the boundaries of the company called TPHL. And the persons who established that company, and that is in the internal audit report, Mr. Kwamina,
yes,
that you have submitted, right? Resulting in the company and the taxpayers in 2019. And this occurred between 2019 and 2022, resulting in the taxpayers losing, according to the internal audit report, some $200,000 US. I don't know if anyone would have brought this to your attention, but that is almost $1.2 or $3 million that somebody was able to cash at a Royal Bank outlet through an ATM machine. So what I would like to find out, as the head of this company, this holding company, whether you are aware of this internal audit reports, and if you are aware, what action, what measures have been taken to have those monies recovered, or maybe, put it another way, have we been able to recover the $200,000 US as it relates to that particular practice that occurred? Sure. I am not too sure, because this was in 2019. So if you could tell us what has happened.
I will undertake to respond to you with that in writing, but I will say that I have recently, within the last 6 months, sat through a presentation by the IT department, especially with what is going on in Trinidad, or globally, I should say. And the organization is attacked frequently. And we have very, very vigorous measures in place to prevent anything like that occurring. But I will certainly respond to you in relation to this particular incident in writing and give you the details of that.
Now, you see, these things are very important because there has been a breakdown in internal controls at this company.
Well, I wouldn't...
Wait. We have the evidence here.
I wouldn't term it a breakdown, Mr.
Well, even you may not call it a breakdown. But what I'm saying is that the evidence is showing that you have had a series of unauthorized payments of overtime. That is why my colleague said earlier, we cannot go into those things in detail today.
Well,
We are not going into details.
Can we go into when and give him an idea, and then we'll have a time when we would do it and not be premature, please, Chair? Because
yes. So what I'm saying, I want to come to, I take my point, I take my colleague's point, but I will pause at this time because I have the information, but we'll have separate interventions on these matters. However, the CEO made mention, based on Mr. McClatchy's question, safety and health. I think I got 0.18 for 2023. Mr. Chairman, Mr. Kwamina, could you tell this committee on safety and health within the TPHL and its family subsidiary companies? Could you tell us whether that function has been outsourced since TPHL has been established? And if it has been outsourced, to whom has it been outsourced? And whether the company does what I call serious monitoring of the activities of the contractor that safety and health has been outsourced to, because you may be getting a surprise because of the under-reporting of accidents, safety and health issues that are not being brought to your attention as a company. I say no more at this time. We will deal with this thing separately. However, can you tell this body, this committee, is safety and health outsourced, and to whom and at what cost?
I'll ask the CEO of Heritage to answer that question.
So no, safety and health is not outsourced. We have a very strong HSE culture, as well as an HSE organization that is led by a direct report of mine. We have several mechanisms that we do in order to try and monitor that. We have what's called a behavior-based safety program, where observations are made by coworkers. I made one just the other day driving out of Pinal, and we had a great safety conversation with the individual who was doing things right, as it turned out. My first look at it was incorrect. And so one of the tenets that we live by is safety is everybody's responsibility. So we have what's called a stop work program, where if there is a change in conditions or if there is a hazard that's identified, the individual who's doing that work has the right to stop that work. His colleagues also have the right to stop that work. We have what are called leadership site visits or field verifications, where we, as leaders, go out to the field. I do joint walks with other CEOs of our contractors to watch work in action and show that as Heritage is the operator and the contractors that we operate with, that it is one culture. It is not the contractors have their own system and we have our own system. We do it together. Up front, as we are going out to bid and award a bid, we do a bridging document to ensure that all our safety processes aligned and that there aren't gaps in terms of how we want to cover particular activities, whether that's through permits or other things. So while there's still work to do, we have made a lot of progress, and I'd say safety is everybody's responsibility. It's not something that we outsource to an individual or to a different company.
All right. Mr. CEO, how long have you been there at the company? 9 months now?
9 months, yes.
9 months. Are you categorically stating to this committee that, as far as you are aware, safety and health within TPHL, and in this instance, Heritage, is an internal function and is not outsourced to any private organization, private contractor. As far as you are aware, that does not exist under your watch. Am I right?
So we'll work on a comprehensive written response. While a good example is we might have a contract doctor that rules on medical cases. So what I want to be careful of is make sure that I give a comprehensive response on that.
Chair.
When I look at safety overall, that is not outsourced.
Okay. We will pause because there are many other questions. Time is against us today. And one of the reasons we have to drill down into this company, Mr. Chairman, you may not be aware of what is going on in your company. And I'll have to bring it to your attention.
Sure.
But not today. Not today. Not today.
Chairman, may I suggest through you that whatever concerns we have in order to enable us to have a fruitful meeting next, that we provide it in writing beforehand so that they will be aware, so we get to the truth.
No, what I'm saying is that everything I'm talking about here
Yes.
is contained
In the document.
in this
and
document here.
provided.
So what I'm saying is that this is not coming out of my head. It's coming out of this
So
document.
you would say that we'd want them to review the documentation?
No, well, I'm saying the reason why we have to deal with it separately
Yes.
is because we want to give the company adequate time
Agreed.
to reflect
Agreed.
on what they have submitted and to respond to queries arising out of what have been submitted.
Chair.
That is all what I'm saying.
Chair, respectfully too, because you haven't made that point. Remember, let us not depart from, as a committee, what is currently before us, which is the 2019 period.
This is what is before us, my
which
dear.
is for the audited
My
period for
dear,
2019.
may I interrupt you as chairman? Whatever I say is about 2019. Everything is contained here. So I'm saying that we are not going further into what is contained here. We will give everyone an opportunity because you yourself, my colleague here, my friend here, did not get a chance to drill down to understand this thing properly. So I understand what has happened. So, Mr. Kwamina, I think that I'd like to thank you on behalf of this entire committee. And I'd like to thank the permanent secretary. I'd like to thank our colleagues out of the Ministry of Finance, Investment Division for coming here. I'd like to thank the chairman of PARIA, Mr. Newman George, also the CEO, Mr. Mustaq Mohammed, all the personnel, CEO that have come here. We thank you very much for being here with us today. We are going to be communicating with you shortly where and when, Mr. Kwamina, you will be back because you are the head, you are in charge. So you are going to be back. And
what about Mr. George? Wouldn't he be back also?
Yes, of course. Mr. George will
we
be
don't
back.
want them to feel left out, do we?
Yeah, Heritage, Petroleum, Legacy, Garahara, everybody. What I'm saying, the constant feature would be our friend,
Mr. Chairman.
Michael Kwamina.
Mr. Chairman, I'm pleased to be a constant feature. One thing I wanted to say, though, is that you did mention, and it would assist because these things you can imagine take up. If you do intend to call back one entity at a time, or you intend to call it back as a group again?
No. The committee will have to deliberate on
Much
that.
obliged.
I wouldn't want to make a decision on that. The committee will deliberate on that.
Much obliged.
Okay? Yes. So may I, on behalf of the committee, warmly thank you and express our collective appreciation to the entire team for being here. And we shall be communicating to you in writing shortly as to the next steps.
Much obliged.
So have a wonderful evening. This meeting is now suspended.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.